Alright, so let's just get into this wild clip and then I'll provide a little bit of context around it and give you my take at the end of the video. You all remember the Freedom Convoy, the protest that was in Ottawa in February of this year, and you might already know that over the past 30 days there's been a big inquiry to try to determine whether or not the government was justified in invoking the Emergencies Act to clear up the protest. In this video, the lawyer for the convoy, Brendan Miller, chases a potential witness down the hallway asking him to come testify.
Would you agree to testify? I can get the commissioner to organize it. Would you agree to me? Yeah. What's my name? Talk to you later. I was wondering if you'd like to testify.
It's a dramatic scene, right? You see a lawyer chasing a witness down the hall while there's an inquiry going on in the other room. But the reason that he's chasing him is going to make a lot more sense once you understand what has been going on over the past couple of days. You see, back during the convoy, there was one day where a protester was seen carrying around a Nazi flag. Obviously, this is a bad look for the convoy organizers who are saying, hey, that is not what we're representing here. That is not the goal of this protest. That person does not represent us. Now, there's different ideas around who that could have been, who could have been holding that flag and carrying it around. Some people believe that it was a government plant trying to make the convoy look bad. Other people just believe that it was an extremist that was sort of co-opting the entire movement to push a different message. Either way, seeing someone with a flag like that at your protest doesn't do your protest any good in the eyes of the public, and this is exactly what Brendan Miller has been bringing up constantly over the past number of days. He's been trying to convince the commissioner of the inquiry to allow him to bring witnesses to the stand to ask about this whole flag situation, and he's even gone as far as linking this flag situation to the government directly.
These horrible, the Nazi flag and all those things that people saw in Ottawa, you'd agree if it turned out those flags were linked to your government. That would look really bad for our international reputation, wouldn't it?
Based on some
Okay, next. So he makes the assertion that the government's linked to this flag and then immediately leaves the stand. And in the previous days, he's actually linked the flag holder to this unique individual. He says that this was someone named Brian Fox. So obviously Brian Fox and his employer, Enterprise Canada, weren't very happy that these statements were made so publicly, and as a result, the very next day, Brendan Miller, this is the lawyer, he was served with a lawsuit of his own, a defamation case saying, hey, you can't say this about me without any evidence. This is what the libel suit is saying, and here's a clip of Brendan Miller actually getting served these lawsuit papers. Now, inside of these papers that he was served, likely there were some similar statements to the ones that Enterprise Canada put out about Brian Fox. Here's what was written in the National Post just yesterday. Enterprise has denounced the claim as absurd, despicable, and highly defamatory, saying that Brian Fox is not a Liberal Party member, supporter, or collaborator. He's a long-standing member of and contributor to the Conservative Party of Canada and participated in the recent leadership process to support Mr. Poilievre. They continue to say your implication that Mr. Fox colluded with the incumbent government, the Liberals, to discredit the protesters has absolutely no basis in fact and is reckless. Likely this is similar to the statements that were inside of the papers that he was served. And we're going to get into the point where Brendan Miller ends up chasing someone down the hall, but first we need to understand what gives Brendan Miller, the lawyer, the idea that this is certainly Brian Fox who was holding this flag at the protests in February. Brendan Miller says he believes this because of two things. The first bit of evidence is the statement by one of the protesters, Sean Folks, who says, I can confirm that Brian Fox is the man that I met with the Nazi flag on January 29th, 2022. And the second piece that Miller uses is photos that were taken from, admittedly, a long distance here. We have sort of this image of the person who was holding the flag, and he says, hey, that looks quite a lot like Brian Fox. If you just look at the two pictures, he says that that's enough to sort of show that these two are the same people, this one being Brian Fox and this one being the person that he's accusing of being Brian Fox. But the commissioner or judge of the proceedings of the Emergencies Act said, hey, you don't really have enough evidence here for me to start bringing up witnesses to talk about this whole situation. And also, he deems that this whole situation isn't entirely relevant to the inquiry because the inquiry is about determining whether or not the Emergencies Act should have or shouldn't have been invoked by the federal government, not necessarily whether or not a plant was put into this protest with holding that flag, or if it was another extremist that came in and sort of co-opted it. He says that's not what the inquiry is about. The inquiry is about, did the government have the information that it needed to determine this a situation where the Emergencies Act deemed necessary to invoke. So Brendan Miller, the lawyer, wants Brian Fox to testify, and he's been pushing this all week, even though the commissioner says, no, we're not going to have him come in. But then out of the corner of his eye, Brendan Miller thinks that he sees Brian Fox leaving the room saying, oh, like, why is this guy here? So he starts chasing him.
Would you agree to testify? I can get the commissioner to organize it. Would you agree? Yeah. What's my name? Talk to you later. I was wondering if you'd like to testify.
But halfway through the clip that I just showed you, Brendan Miller, the lawyer, realizes or is told that, hey, this isn't Brian Fox. This isn't the same guy. This is a totally different person. You've got the wrong guy here. This is who Brendan Miller chased down the hall thinking that it was Brian Fox. And I guess I can kind of see the resemblance. You can take a look at this guy, beard, a little bit of gray in the beard with some glasses, and then a look at Brian Fox, again, similar profile. They look kind of similar, so I can see how this mistake could be made. But if you've been following along here, you can kind of start to see a little bit of irony here because Brendan Miller, the lawyer, thinks that this Greg guy looks like Brian, and that's the reason that the mistake was made. You can kind of see the irony starting to build here with what the claims that Brendan Miller has been making in the courtroom are. And this is something that he even recognizes while he's joking with the reporters just after this mix-up happened.
I thought that was kind of funny, actually. Well, you thought it too? See there, I'm not crazy. So apparently, well, there you go. There's a hole in my case. Apparently, there's a lot of people out there that look like Mr. Fox who served me with a defamation notice.
I'm sorry. Did you actually think that was Brian Fox?
No, I didn't. He did.
So you can kind of see why Brendan Miller is getting a little bit of criticism for this, because one of the two reasons that he said he believes that Brian Fox is the guy that was holding that flag is that because he identifies the guy in the picture to be similar looking to the guy that to Brian Fox, right? But then right after he mistakes a different guy for Brian Fox, saying, okay, maybe there's a lot of guys that look like this guy, kind of discrediting one of the points that he was using to say that Brian Fox was the guy holding the flag. But now let's get into my take on all of this. And I want to preface it by saying that when the Emergencies Act was invoked, and you can even go back and watch the video that I made on it, right from then I said I'm not a fan of this Emergencies Act being invoked. I don't think that it is the right time for an Emergencies Act to be invoked, and I'm scared of the precedent that it sets for future governments. If you are protesting something that you don't believe in, and that future government has an easier time being able to invoke the Emergencies Act because of a rather loose invocation of it this time, well, that can set a dangerous precedent. So with that said, let's get into my take on this individual situation with Brendan Miller. I don't think that he's doing all that great a job throughout this inquiry, especially with regards to this flag situation, because again, the point of the entire inquiry is not to determine whether or not the protesters got a bad look or the government contributed to the protesters having a bad public image as a result of this. That's not what the inquiry is about. The entire point of the inquiry is something that was brought on by the Emergencies Act, saying, hey, after you invoke the Emergencies Act, you got to do a big study on whether or not the government had sufficient grounds to invoke it, sort of as a check of power of the government. This is the entire point of this commission, not necessarily, again, determining whether or not this person holding the flag was someone that was connected to the government. And with this whole ordeal and only having a couple points that show that this is Brian Fox who's holding the flag, and then sort of counteracting one of the points you made by mistaking Brian Fox for another person the very next day, I think that's not the best look. And I would far rather Brendan Miller, if you were actually representing the interests of the people who protested effectively, focus more on the extreme powers that the Emergency Act gives the government and the financial regulations and the financial freezing of assets assets, all of these powers that the government had without getting warrants, talking more about this as a part of this entire inquiry rather than some sort of loose claims. But that's just my opinion at this point of time, and things change as new information comes out, and everyone's welcome to have a take of their own. I don't profess to think that my take is absolutely right, and I hope that you don't profess the same in your take as well. I always like to think on this channel we can have open conversations about different things that are going on, and we don't have to just stick to believing in one person wholeheartedly because they're the ones who have been chosen to represent the viewpoint that we tend to prescribe to. I think this way for this lawyer, but also you don't have to love Trudeau 100% in order to be someone who believes in liberal values, just like you don't have to love Pierre Poilievre 100% to be someone that believes in conservative values. We have to detach the individual statements that politicians make from the persona that they're putting forward and just critique those individual statements and those individual viewpoints on an entirely isolated basis. But let me know what you think of all this drama down below in the comment section. I read every single one and I try to get back to a bunch of them. There could be more that comes out after Trudeau testifies today on this Emergencies Act invocation. So who knows, we could have more videos about this coming out in the future. But either way, thanks so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I hope this video has helped you out at least a little bit. And I'll see you next time.